Brianna and her family relocated to a smaller town after her dad accepted a job there. To her astonishment, she met someone who looked exactly like her on her first day of school. Patrick, Brianna Kemp's father, faced the challenging task of relocating his family from Chicago to a quaint Maryland town following the collapse of his business. Fortunately, Patrick's older brother Tom owned a car shop in Maryland and extended a job opportunity to him as a sales clerk. The relocation meant a fresh start for 11-year-old Brianna, but it wasn't without its hurdles. Having been a popular cheerleader at her Chicago school, Brianna struggled to adjust to the change. She cherished her close-knit group of friends and found the prospect of making new acquaintances daunting. When it was time to go to school, her father drove her there to wish her well. "Good luck, sweetheart. I know this is going to be difficult for you, but you can do it." "I know you can," he said, giving her a kiss on the forehead. "Thanks, Dad," Brianna said quietly before leaving the car. While she was sad, Brianna loved her parents very much. She didn't want her dad to worry even more, so she put on a brave smile and waved before her father drove away. When she got to the school, she was instructed to head straight to the principal's office. She was quickly greeted by the school's secretary. "Hello, you must be Brianna. Welcome to Chester Middle," she said. "Thank you," Brianna responded shyly. With that, the principal looked outside the clear window in her room and saw Brianna waiting. She headed out swiftly to greet her. "Brianna, welcome. We're so glad to have you here with us. I'm going to give you a quick tour of the school before bringing you to your classroom," she said, putting a reassuring arm on Brianna's shoulder. Mrs. Kepler showed Brianna around, pointing out the cafeteria, the school auditorium, and the gym. They also passed through the art and music rooms, science laboratories, and the kitchen. "If you ever need anything, feel free to ask any of your classmates. They'd be more than willing to help. Don't be afraid to make friends here. They're all very nice kids," Mrs. Kepler assured her, and Brianna nodded. "Thank you for the tour and the warm welcome, Mrs. Kepler," she said. "Here we are at your classroom. This is your teacher, Mrs. Anderson, and here are your classmates," Mrs. Kepler said as they entered the class. "Let's all welcome your newest classmate. This is Brianna," she announced. "Hey, Brianna," the kids said in unison. Brianna smiled and waved. Suddenly, her classmates started whispering after they noticed something about Brianna's face. "Oh, you look like," Mrs. Anderson started to say. Mrs. Kepler shot her a concerned look and instead pointed to the empty chair next to a girl who had her head down. "You can sit next to Catherine over there. Catherine, it's time to wake up now. We're about to start the class," the teacher added, tapping a ruler on Catherine's desk. As Catherine lifted her head, Brianna was on her way to her desk. However, when their eyes locked, the two girls suddenly had horrified looks on their faces. At that, one kid shouted, "You look like twins." "How could that be?" Catherine said as she looked at their reflections in the classroom window. Mrs. Kepler and Mrs. Anderson noticed a shock on the girls' faces, so they decided to call their parents in for some questions. While Mrs. Kepler waited for the parents to arrive, Mrs. Anderson went on with her class for the day. Although both Catherine and Brianna were distracted, they tried their best to listen to the lectures, as they both wanted to be honor students. An hour later, just in time for recess, the parents of Brianna and Catherine arrived at the school. When they saw the two girls walking toward them, their faces turned pale. In fact, Brianna's mother almost passed out when she saw how identical they looked. Meanwhile, Catherine's parents had a hunch about what was going on. "Sweetheart, why don't you take your new friend to the cafeteria? Us parents will just have a quick talk," her mom suggested. Catherine nodded and had Brianna follow her to have a snack. When they were gone, Catherine's mom, Christy Asbury, asked Brianna's parents, "Did you happen to adopt your daughter?" When they nodded, she understood and confirmed her hunch, then shared her side of the story. "Well, I'm guessing we both know why they look alike, right? 11 years ago, we were in Prague to adopt a daughter. A good friend of mine lived there and helped us through the adoption process to make it quicker and easier. So we decided to adopt from there," she explained. "At the time, we fell in love with Catherine as soon as we saw her. She had the most beautiful white skin and gorgeous blue eyes. However, when we were told she had a twin sister, we admitted we wouldn't be able to take care of two children, so using our money, we paid off the orphanage to separate them," Christy said shamefully. "It was such a huge mistake, and I regret it. I didn't think the girls would ever meet again, but now that they have, I feel the need to apologize to Brianna and Catherine," she concluded. Brianna's mom, Heather, was in tears. I don't know what to say. While I'm sad Brianna and Catherine had to grow apart, I am also somewhat glad that happened because if we hadn't, we wouldn't have our darling daughter with us, she said with a hint of guilt. We were also in Europe at the time and adopted Brianna because I'm part Czech. While visiting my father's family, my cousin told me about a little girl who'd been abandoned at the orphanage. She knew I wanted a child, so she wondered if we were willing to adopt her and take her back to the US somehow. I feel like it's fate that the two of them suddenly met at school. Maybe they're really meant to be in one another's lives, Patrick interjected. Yes, my love. For them to know each other as sisters, we'd love to spend more time with your family too. We'll treat your daughter as if she were our own, and I hope you could do the same with Catherine. David, Catherine's dad, suggested. That day, the parents waited until the children finished classes before breaking the news. They were called into a classroom after school, where the parents explained the situation. Although already aware of their adoption, the girls were stunned to learn they were twins. Despite the surprise, both Catherine and Brianna were thrilled, having longed for siblings. I'm glad we found each other, Catherine said, embracing Brianna. Me too. I hope we can get to know each other more, Brianna replied. From then on, Catherine and Brianna became inseparable friends. Their families also grew close, spending holidays and special occasions together. Catherine's parents, upon learning of Brianna's family's financial struggles, extended support and treated them as part of their own family.